Hello, I'm back here again to talk about, American domestic politics. And this is going to be a discussion about the Michigan Senate race in the primary, in the Democratic primary, and the current civil war that's brewing in the Democratic Party, which I would argue the DSA and the progressive populist wing is starting to finally win the argument. And the race between Haley Stevens and Dr. Eldul Sai, they're essentially tied in the polling. Obviously, if you see the campaign style of both these candidates, the progressive candidate is clearly a better candidate by the way he talks and communicates and connects with people. Where Haley Stevens just looks like a ridiculous puppet, and she's just running on whatever the elite tell her to run on. It's kind of funny, but it's just so obvious of a side matchup between these two. And voters are seeing it because I want to remind people in the beginning of the race, she was technically the front runner. So all this shock, oh, she's polling ahead. She was supposed to be the front runner originally. She had all the corporate backing. She had the highest name recognition. I want to remind people that this is what I mean. The times in politics are starting to change. So it was her, Mallory McMoore, and Abdul Saeed. Now he was third place originally in the race. And then with all the splash of them attacking him, he got elevated and he ended up becoming more popular as a result. And suddenly he became the front runner in the race. Mallory McMoore's numbers dropped because she spent a lot of time attacking him on nonsense. And again, I was saying she was that middle of the road, center left but not left, center. But and to be fair, she had a fair amount of endorsements too, but she didn't gain much traction. By the time their waist riddled down, she dropped far enough in the polls that she eventually dropped out. Now, she essentially didn't endorse anybody. She just left the race and did her concession speech. But that being said, now it's between the progressive and the moderate. It's between the progressive and the establishment, basically. But Haley Stevens is a uniquely weak candidate, especially for the establishment. And the general election shows she actually does worse against the Republican candidate, Rogers, who ran last time, by the way, and lost narrowly to Alyssa Slotkin. But Haley Stevens is even a weaker candidate than Alyssa Slotkin. I'm seeing her running, and I'm just like, she looks so unbelievably weak when she goes out and talks. She comes off awkward when she talks to people. So, aside from the personality skid here and the candidate quality, I just want to highlight how much AIPAC has spent in this race to elevate her candidacy. $50 million. They spent $50 million, a pro-Israeli PAC, who wants to continue to send our money overseas on behalf of Israel, spent $50 million against the Dr. Abdul. Okay, the progressive candidate. $50 million on behalf of Haley Stevens. If it's taking this much to drag her through a primary, what do you think is going to happen in a general election? She's clearly not a strong candidate. She's barely making it through a primary. Okay. I want to remind you, $50 million to get her where she got. Because she fell behind the polls for a while. And then she caught wind again. She gained support because of all the negative attacks against the other guy. And the fact that she was dishonest with voters and said that Obama endorsed her, which he did not. If you notice, a lot of people have not endorsed in this race. In that race in Michigan. Matter of fact, Abdul's gotten more endorsements than her. So that should tell you a lot right there. Because usually the establishment comes out for their own. It's really AIPAC coming out for her. A pro-Israel PAC, which, by the way, is not affiliated with Democrats. They spent in Republican primaries, too. They also ultimately were the ones that spent millions of dollars to defeat Thomas Massie in his primary. In the Republican primary for Congress in Kentucky. They're the ones that spent millions of billions of dollars to unseat Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman in 2024. So, AIPAC aligned candidates are not our friends. Okay? If AIPAC's endorsing them and backing them and spending millions and millions and millions of dollars, you see all these attack ads on TV, that's a bad sign. That is the candidate you don't want to support, because that PAC is not democratic at all. It says Democratic majority, democracy alliance. It's not. It's not a democracy PAC. They're lying, and they'll run a lot of misleading ads, and they do it on a regular basis. But she's not a good candidate. The fact that they have to spend so much money to drag her through a primary, and right now it's looking like Abdul's gaining the momentum again. And to be fair, with the amount of support or money behind Haley, she can still win. But I'm willing to guess that Abdul's going to win this primary. And I think, and it shows in the general election, he does better against a Republican than she does. Okay. So all this talk of electability, it's nonsense. It's freaking nonsense. Okay. And the idea that their candidates are more electable, it's not true. There's no evidence that bears that out. Okay. Matter of fact, I would argue the old guard of the Democratic Party's done a terrible job at beating MAGA. It's been the progressives that's been doing it. It's been the populist candidates that have been doing it. It's been the people that are willing to tell the hard truths, not the people that are taking corporate PAC money and the same money that Republicans are taking and effectively supporting status quo policies that are getting us nowhere in this country. Okay. I mean, you see the evidence for yourself. But I want to show you a clip about a guy condemning the amount of money. It was such an interesting point. The amount of money that has been spent on Haley Stevens' behalf to prop her candidacy up for U.S. Senate. Okay. And I want to remind people, she was a foil that was used last time against a progressive congressman who was critical of Israeli invention in Gaza, and American taxpayers' money going to their causes. Was Andy Levin, a progressive congressman who AIPAC spent millions of dollars to unseat when they redrew the districts in Michigan to prop up Haley Stevens' congressional career. Because she is the face of the status quo. She is the face of failed politicking in the Democratic Party. She is the face of yesteryear's politics in the Democratic Party. Okay. And all these people that endorsed her are also the face of the status quo. You got a lot of these people, you got the Chuck Schumers of the world. We see how well his leadership's working out. You got the Congressional Black Caucus. Don't fall for that shenanigans. Just because they say Congressional Black Caucus doesn't mean they're progressive. Okay, they always have established. They have always backed the establishment candidates. They always have. And you've seen how well their candidates do in elections. Not well. They backed Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, and then begrudgingly backed Kamala Harris. Okay. The only one that won out of their endorsements in the recent years has been Joe Biden. Okay. And you've seen what quality candidates those three candidates have been in comparison to what the voters actually want. So don't buy the shenanigans by any means. She represents the politics of yesteryear. She represents what's wrong with the Democratic Party. And I hope Michigan voters make the right decision. I mean, it's ultimately going to be up to them. Anyways, that's all I want to comment about this Michigan Senate race and Democratic primary Michigan Senate race. Anyways, I'm going to show you guys a clip about this guy's comments. It's hella base. It's so funny. All right, y'all. Have a great night. Goodbye.